The Snail Bride. The sun hung low over the furrowed fields, a bruised plum against the darkening horizon. For the man, his days were measured not in hours, but in the relentless rhythm of the hoe striking the unyielding earth. His back, curved by years of labor, bore a weight far heavier than the basket of stones he carried. It was the profound, suffocating silence of a life lived alone. In this corner of the world, silence was a living thing. It settled in the corners of his cramped kitchen and curled up beside him on his cold floor. He was a man of the soil, smelling of rain-soaked dirt and wood smoke. Yet in his heart, there was a void that no harvest could ever fill. One evening, as the shadows lengthened and the crickets began their rhythmic pulse, the man paused. He looked at the vast empty expanse of his field and let out a long, ragged sigh that had been building for decades. "With whom shall I share this life?" he whispered to the wind. "With whom shall I eat this meager rice, earned with the sweat of my brow?" The question was not meant for an answer. It was a lament, a surrender to the isolation that had become his only companion. But then, something caught the fading light. Tucked beneath the broad, waxy leaf of a plant near the irrigation ditch sat a snail. It was unusually large, its shell a swirl of deep emerald and iridescent pearl, gleaming as if it had been polished by the hands of a deity. It was a strange, beautiful anomaly in his rugged world. He picked it up, feeling its cool, smooth weight in his calloused palm. And in that moment, a voice rippled through the stillness, not a sound heard with the ears, but a vibration felt in the marrow of his bones. "With me," the voice seemed to say, soft as the rustle of silk against a stone floor. "You shall eat with me." The man froze. The air grew thick with the scent of wildflowers that didn't belong to this season. For the first time in his life, the silence was broken, and the loneliness that had defined him began to shift, like the first crack in a frozen lake. The man placed the emerald snail in a large earthen water jar near his kitchen. He did not know why he felt the need to keep it, only that the silence of his home seemed less oppressive with the creature resting there. The following morning, he returned to the fields. The sun was a relentless master, and the dust filled his lungs. But when the long shadows of evening beckoned him home, he found not the cold, empty hearth he expected, but a miracle. A table stood in the center of his small room, laden with dishes that seemed to defy his poverty. There was steaming white rice, delicate mountain herbs seasoned with oils he could never afford, and a broth that smelled of deep, savory secrets. The steam rose in elegant spirals, dancing in the dim light of his oil lamp. There was no one there. No footprints in the dust, no rustle of silk in the corners, only the snail resting quietly in its jar. Days turned into a week. Each evening the ritual repeated. The phantom feast grew more elaborate, the flavors more profound. The man ate with a mixture of reverence and growing dread. He was no longer a solitary creature eating for survival. He was a guest at a banquet prepared by an invisible ghost. The curiosity eventually became a fever. One morning, instead of heading to the fields, The man hid behind a stack of weathered grain sacks in the corner of his porch. He waited, his heart drumming against his ribs like a trapped bird. As the sun reached its zenith, a soft, iridescent glow began to emanate from the water jar. The water rippled, not from a breeze, but from a stirring within. Then it happened. From the mouth of the emerald shell, a mist began to pour, a white, silken vapor that smelled of lotuses and ancient rain. The mist coalesced, taking shape and weight. First, a hand, pale as moonlight and slender as a willow branch. Then, a shoulder, draped in robes the color of a dragonfly's wing. A woman emerged. She did not merely walk, she moved with a grace that suggested she was a creature of a different element, a being of air and light, momentarily bound to the earth. Her beauty was not the fleeting prettiness of the village girls. It was a devastating, timeless elegance that made the man's breath catch in his throat. She moved toward the kitchen, her presence turning the dilapidated hut into a sanctuary. The man watched, paralyzed, as the Snail bride began her silent work, her every movement a silent symphony in his gray world. The silence that had once been a heavy shroud over the small hut was transformed. It was no longer empty. It was a shared space, a vessel filled with the unspoken understanding between two souls from different worlds. The man and the woman lived in a quiet, rhythmic harmony, their lives intertwined like the roots of the ancient willow by the stream. She remained a creature of mystery, a daughter of the sea or perhaps the stars, yet she performed the most mundane tasks with the devotion that felt like a prayer. The man watched her as she mended his tattered clothes, her needle moving with the precision of a weaver of fate. In her presence, the coarse barley tasted like nectar, and the leaking roof seemed to shelter a palace. Their happiness was a delicate thing, a glass ornament held in a trembling hand. They did not speak of the future, for the future belonged to the world outside their door, a world governed by laws that had no room for emerald snails and celestial brides. The first shadow fell on a day of blinding brightness. The local magistrate, a man whose greed was as vast as the lands he governed, passed by the fields in a lacquered palanquin. He was a predator of beauty, his eyes always searching for what he could claim as his own. Through the silk curtains of his carriage, he caught a glimpse of something that did not belong in a peasant's yard, a flash of iridescent robe, a profile of such devastating grace that it seemed to mock the dirt beneath it. The palanquin stopped. The air, once sweet with the scent of summer grass, suddenly turned cold and thin. The man, sensing a change in the wind, looked up from his toil. He saw the guards, their spears gleaming with a predatory light, and the magistrate's gaze fixed upon his home like a vulture circling a dying animal. The fragile peace they had built was not broken yet, but the first hairline fracture had appeared. The world had noticed them, and the world was never kind to miracles it could not possess. The intrusion was not a storm, but a cold, calculated theft. Power does not need to raise its voice to be heard. It merely reaches out and takes. The guards, with their iron-tipped spears and faces of stone, did not see a woman or a miracle. They saw property to be confiscated for their master. The man stood paralyzed in the doorway of his home, his calloused hands, once so capable of coaxing life from the soil, now useless and trembling. He watched as they took her, the woman of air and light, dragging her toward the lacquered palanquin as if she were nothing more than a common prisoner. There was no battle, only a rupture. The air in the hut, once thick with the scent of lotuses and shared warmth, turned stale and hollow. In the chaos, the earthen water jar was overturned. It shattered against the stone floor, the sound sharp and final. The emerald shell, the vessel of his salvation, lay among the shards, cracked and lifeless. It no longer gleamed with an iridescent light. It was merely a piece of debris in a world that had reclaimed its cruelty. Days bled into weeks of gray, agonizing silence. The man returned to his fields, but his hoe felt heavier than lead, and the earth offered no comfort. He would sit by the ruins of the water jar every evening, staring at the empty space where a banquet once appeared. The silence was no longer a shroud, it was a ghost. Some say he wasted away until his heart simply forgot to beat. Others whisper that on certain nights, when the moon is thin and the mist rises from the irrigation ditch, two birds can be seen circling the old willow tree, one a common sparrow of the fields, the other a creature with wings the color of a dragonfly's wing, forever seeking a home that the world would not let them keep. The miracle was gone, leaving behind only the bitter memory of what it felt like to not be alone,